Hello, I'm Meganova, and this is my first episode of Pillow Talk, which seems self explanatory. I'm in my bed laying on my pillow, so yeah, I thought that made sense. And my first episode is gonna be on Coco, which I watched yesterday. The original plan was that I would have talked about it just as I got home, but I ended up going on YouTube, watching videos, getting sidetracked, and when I finally actually got around to trying to do the video, I was so tired that it would have not been good. But yeah, I ended up watching some other reviews of the movie and such, and that didn't really change my opinion at all. Like I just heard other people's opinions about it. I generally think that it was a great movie. I will try. I will make sure not to do any spoilers at first. My plan is that I will do a spoiler section towards the end of the video where I talk more about what happens and such. I'll just go over like the general stuff at first. But yeah, it's probably my third favorite Pixar movie at the moment, just behind Toy Story 2 and Inside Out. Sorry, I have the sniffles right now. I'm sorry if that's annoying, but I can't really do much about it. So but yeah, the way the movie starts is that you learn about the the ancestors in this family. That the great great grandmother, I'm pretty sure it is, yeah, great great grandmother. She she was married to a man who played music. They had a daughter, and he left because he wanted to go and play his music for the world. And because of that, she started resenting music, like just completely removed all types of music from her life because in her mind music had just ruined the family. And because Mexicans are like really extreme when it comes to holding family values, like they really hold family up to an extremely high standard. Like I'm not saying we don't do that, but they keep it really high. Um no, actually before I delve deeper into the actual story, I want to talk about a bit the before I actually went to see the movie. I was on the website for the cinema. I always I always order the tickets online first, just so, because I'm a bit of, I guess I'm kind of a snob when it comes to going to the cinema, in the sense that I absolutely want to have the VIP seats, like the big leather seats and stuff. But the problem is, I want to see the movie in the original version. But the problem is, I'm Danish, live in Denmark, so which is also why the movie only recently came out here, because we need to wait for the dubbed version to have been made. Once the dubbed version is made, they will put them in the theaters side by side. That's how they do it here. That's why we have to wait like 2 months before we can actually see the movie. Unless we pirate it, but I don't really want to do that too much. Um, but so I could only, but because I want to see it in the original version without subtitles, it was only in very small screenings. But the good thing about that means that I'm gonna have to deal with a lot less little kids, because, well, not many of them are gonna be able to actually understand English, so their parents won't be taking them. And the I think there were three families that went here, and all of them only had just had one little girl with them, which was nice because girls generally tend to be less noisy than boys. Like, that's just how it is. So I greatly appreciated that. So it was nice and quiet, except for, well, people laughed when things were funny and stuff. Of course. Okay, that's just a little tangent. Sorry about that. I tend to ramble a bit at times. Um, but yeah, and when you've gone past that, she's the great grandmother, she decides that she wants to be a shoemaker. And it ends up being like this big family business thing where everybody in the family starts making shoes. And then we get to present day. And I think it is basically present day. Like it is like an it looks like a kind of old-timey Mexican city, but yeah, okay, not necessarily present day, but probably in the 90s or something like that. I get a bit of an old TV, and he was watching stuff on VHS. So I'm assuming it's like 80s, 90s, it's supposed to be. Um, and it's, as we all know, it's surrounding the Mexican holiday of Day of the Dead. And I appreciate how much we actually learn about like the customs of the Day of the Dead in the in the movie. Like I know barely anything of it. The only thing I know is that it's about appreciating your ancestors and respecting the dead and stuff like that. But I didn't really know any of the customs, any of the certain things they do, like the offerings they give them, the special petals they lay out through the streets in order for the ancestors spirits to be able to get to their houses and lead them there, and that they believe they have to be up on this altar called the familia. They have to have their pictures on there, or else they can't cross over. um but there's Miguel, who is, or Miguel, is the proper pronunciation, I guess. Um, and he's the youngest child in the family, and he has a great appreciation for music. But because the rest of the family does has this like devil complex about music, like to just all music is shunned constantly because they believe music cursed the family. um that means he has to hide this. So uh, because he's so young, he can't really go into the shoemaking business, so he just do shoe shining instead. So he goes to the plaza where they play music so he can listen to it there, and he has been practicing in hiding with his own homemade guitar, and is like um and yeah, and then we get to the Day of the Dead, and he was talking to again, I will try to avoid too many spoilers. I will just do like overall things. I'll talk about more spoilery later. But there is a talent contest at at the plaza, and he really wants to play there. um Problem is, something happens and his guitar gets destroyed, and so he's. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention there is this Ernesto de la Cruz, who, in Miguel's eyes, is supposed to be like the greatest musician of all time, and through some things he realized, and this is not a spoiler. This is like this is extremely heavily foreshadowed very early on. Like he figures that he must be his great grandfather. Um, and he was from this because he was from the same city and stuff like that. And they have this great tomb in his honor, where his guitar is also placed in there. Um, so he thinks, well, I can just go and borrow that guitar until I've gone and done the talent show and then put it back. But of course, they have all the petals in his tomb as well. And when he plays a chord on the guitar, suddenly he crosses over into the spirit realm. At first, it seems like it doesn't really make sense, but later on, it's explained that because he stole from the dead, that's why he crossed over. And honestly, within the context of everything here, that does kind of make sense, I'd say. Because the whole idea is that you bring offerings to the dead on this day, but if you steal from them, I guess it makes sense that you cross over into the realm of the dead. I don't know, but I, I'll forgive it that it works. And he then meets the spirits of his family, the skeletons of them, and also this movie is fucking gorgeous, and I love all the paintings on all the skeletons. Like, you have all these patterns all around them, and I mean, you can see it on the movie posters, but it's great. Let's just keep it at that. And well, and he goes to the spirit realm, and because a thing happened earlier, his great grandmother can't cross over. But he can't get he in order for him to be able to cross over again, he needs the blessing from a person in his family. Problem is, they can set any they can set any terms they want uh because if he breaks those terms, he will be sent back. Also, he's on a time limit. If he doesn't make it back before sunrise of the next day, he will turn fully skeleton and spirit. Like, he won't be able to get back. He will essentially die. So we are a bit on a timer also. I'm going way too deeply into the plot, but I don't want to give too much away actually, because you really should experience it. But because he can't get the blessing from his family, he realizes he needs to find De La Cruz. Because, as said, he is convinced that he is his great grandfather. So he goes to try and find him, and there's all sorts of things he has to go through in order to do that. And there is an amazing twist. Like, actually, there's two twists. The first twist almost made me disappointed in the movie. Like, there's some things I feel like are a bit predictable, and other things that were wildly unpredictable. But the first big twist you see, it almost kind of disappointed me, but it also surprised me with the amount of balls the movie makers had with this movie. Because like there's murder in this movie, like direct murder. Not just, oh, it's, you don't really see it. No. I mean, it's not like it's bloody or gory, but it's fucking there. And the other twist was so nice and heartwarming. Like, it was so cute. And also the land of the dead looks incredible. Like, the colors, the detail, just everything looked amazing there. And I was so happy that I saw it in 3D. Like, they didn't really do any of the gimmicky shit where it's like, woo, it's 3D, we're gonna throw shit out of you. But it just made it look so much better because you could see the depth of the environments, and that just, it was just great. Like that I was so happy that I went to see it in 3D. That was definitely worth the money. Um, and yeah, and of course, everything leads to the next, and we have a happy ending, and everything's great. But they even though like it's a Pixar movie, and you know everything is gonna be good, there are legit moments where you think, oh, some shit could actually go down. Like, this might not actually go how we want it to be. I know that technically is also a spoiler, but I'm not gonna go too much into detail on that right now. Um, Generally the characters were great. Um, Again, not gonna go too much into detail at first here. But yeah, like definitely it is my number 3 favorite ever Pixar movie. I would say it's absolutely a must watch. And if you have the opportunity to watch it in 3D, absolutely go for it. Like, absolutely you should. It's incredible. And the spirit animals they have in there, like, basically, you know what the pinatas are based on, I'm guessing. They also, and uh, I love the creativity they had with the skeletons, in like the way they moved, and with how they could like fall apart and put themselves back together, and all kinds of funny stuff like that. So some of the like funniest things were that even though they're skeletons, they can still make like the female skeletons look busty, simply by the fact that, well, they don't have anything down here, so the rib cage itself is gonna naturally look like they just have a massive bust. And I thought that was really funny. Like that was just really funny to me. And also the way that they had the clothes hang onto a skeleton that didn't have any skin or meat on it, like, it was just real. I mean, it's Pixar. Of course it's going to be well made, but still I was honestly impressed with just how well made it was. Okay, so that's it for the non-spoiler section. I feel like I've given it good enough of a pitch. Like, if you want to watch the movie based on what I've talked about now, absolutely go do it. Like, stop the video and go watch the movie if you haven't already, because it's great. Um Now I'm gonna go a bit more into the spoiler sections. Okay, so basically, when he gets to the land of the dead, um, he why am I blanking right now? When he gets to the land of the dead, he meets his family, and because his great grandmother, I don't remember all of the names. I'm sorry. Like, I remember Coco, who is his who is his great grandmother. I remember Miguel. I remember Hector, who is this really funny skeleton guy, who we find out is actually his great grandfather. Um, and of course, Ernesto de la Cruz, because we hear his name mentioned over and over again. But yeah, the thing that almost made me disappointed in the movie was because we got to he made it he had to get to this party that De La Cruz was was holding, because he felt like he had, because his great grandmother wouldn't give him, she would give him his blessing, because the thing was, he had knocked her picture off of the Familia, which meant she couldn't go back. With an accident with the dog Dante that he has, which I noticed. Actually, Dante was named after the horse in one of Ernesto de la Cruz's movies. Like, it's a short thing. You might not necessarily notice it, but I caught it, and I was kind of proud of me catching that, because I tend to miss stuff like that in movies. I'm not necessarily the most observational person, or however you want to say that. Never mind. Um, but yeah, he has to go to that because his great grandmother, she's like, I will give you my blessing to go back and put my picture back up on the Familia, but you also have to completely forget about anything regarding playing music. And at first he's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. But then but he's then teleported back to the place from where he was, like, transported into the spirit realm, which is inside De La Cruz's tomb. And then he sees the guitar is still there, and he's like, hey, I will just do whatever I like. But we then find out if you break the conditions, you get sent back. So he can't really do that. And he is like, you know what? No. And because he then remembers, oh yeah, he's my, or he still thinks that he's his great grandfather. He's like, well, I can just go get his blessing to go back. Because of course, he's a musician. Of course he would support me in being a musician. Then he goes back. Or he ends up getting there. I don't want to spoil everything, and I don't want this video to be like the length of the movie. But he ends up getting there. He ends up getting his attention by playing a song at the party. And they start talking, and it seems very nice. And, well, he's just like, well, you know, I felt like I had to share my music with the world. And I'm like, well, I mean, I can't really fault him for that. Like, he wanted to share his music. Like, sure. Like, that's fair. We then find out he's actually a massive prick. Because apparently him and Hector were actually partners. But Hector got homesick and wanted to go home. And he wanted to take all his songs with him. But Ernesto, he was well aware that, well, if Hector left, he wouldn't be able to do as well. Because he was like, well, I can't write songs. It's because of his songs that we are doing as well as we are. Which then ended up leading to him poisoning him. Like, it's like, oh, let's have a toast before you go. And apparently he put some kind of poison in his tequila. In order to steal his songs and go on and be famous. Which only made it that much more satisfying remembering back that he was killed by getting crushed by a giant bell. And once again, like, they show that prominently on screen, the bell falling on top of him. Like, of course you don't see the body, but still, like, in a fucking Pixar kids movie. Or a family movie, whatever. Like, I wasn't sure if I should be shocked or laugh. So I just did like that kind of nervous laugh when it happened, because holy shit. That was surprising. That was one of the surprises, but again, at first it did kind of play with my expectations. It made me think that I had it figured out, but then it threw me for a loop actually, because at first I was like, oh yeah, it's so fucking obvious that De La Cruz is his great grandfather. Like, it's so obvious with everything they had been showing. So obvious. And then we find out that Ernesto killed Hector, and they both end up getting thrown into the same pit. Like, just left there to die and be forgotten or whatever. And also, it's a kind of a plot point that Coco is so old and senile that she has forgotten most things, but the only thing she's still remembering is her father. And they make it a point in the spirit world that if you end up being completely forgotten by your family, you will just fade away, and they call it the last death. Like, it's pretty dramatic. Like, I know it's a movie that deals a lot with death, but they do it mostly in like a comedic fashion. So when they end up dealing with death in a serious fashion, you're still like whoa, holy shit. And you actually see someone fade away because he ends up being forgotten. And that's how they end up getting the guitar. They need to go to the talent show in hopes of, because if you win the talent show, you'll be able to attend Ernesto's party. I know I switch a lot between saying Ernesto and De La Cruz, but I hope you follow me thus far. Okay, but yeah, the twist was that Ernesto poisoned Hector. And then later on, when they're thrown into the pit, Hector is all like, I just wish that I could go back and see my daughter. My dear little Coco. And it makes... And seriously, Batman v Superman should take notes. This is how you get a name out where it makes sense. Like in Batman v Superman, it was so fucking forced. You have to save Martha! Why would you say your own mother's name in that way? Like, it doesn't make sense. But that's a talk for another day. Here, it makes sense that he would say it in this way. And instantly, Miguel is like, what, wait, Coco? But she's my great-grandmother. And then he shows the picture, and he's like, I remember that picture, like, we're family, oh my god! And they realize, well, now, Ernesto, not Ernesto, I'm an idiot. Then they realize, well, Hector can send him back. The problem is they don't have any petals there. But then Dante shows up. And he's like, what? And they realize, well, Dante knew all, because Dante had a couple of times tried to pull Miguel a certain way. My microphone is I was wondering what that was. Okay, and he was often trying to pull Miguel back to because they had a falling out earlier because of a thing where they had essentially both lied to each other, kinda. So they had a bit of a falling out, which is also what ended up leading into them finding out that Hector had been killed by Ernesto. But the thing I was disappointed with was, before we find out that Ernesto is a bad guy, was that the movie didn't really have a bad guy. Like, the closest we had to a bad guy was the great-great-grandmother, but she was mostly just like, well, I just want you to go back so you can put my picture back up on the Familia. Like, she was being a bit of a bitch about it, but that was essentially what she wanted. And that was really honestly fair enough. Um, but yeah, one thing led to another, and they end up finding them. Because um, the great grandmother, she has a spirit animal that is this like giant winged panther, and it just looks amazing. And she basically makes it's basically like a bloodhound, because she makes a smell the petzl he held, and then sniffs him out to find him. And because of that, they end up finding him in the pit. Like I like how they set up things early on that then lead on it, that makes sense. Like it doesn't feel forced or anything, and then it leads into things that helps the plot later on. Like I thought that was really smartly done. Um and then they find him, or they find them. His great grandmother still hasn't forgiven Hector for leaving the family. She does end up forgiving him though, because of the things that happen later on. Um, because yeah, it's like they need, but yeah, Hector went into the party disguised. He had tried to disguise himself to go into the human world earlier on through the customs they have, wearing a costume, haha, um, of this like supposedly famous woman, and he uses that to get into the to Ernesto's party. Um, Another thing that was set up earlier and then pays off later. And he goes and he's like, well, because Miguel had given him his picture back because they had that falling out. He was like, I don't want to put your picture up anymore. You're a jerk. And he goes to try and find him to give him his picture again so he can get his blessing and go back and put it up, because he doesn't want to be forgotten. And that's where the whole twist happens. But that is also where Ernesto is like, no, I'm gonna keep this picture. Which means when they are back out of the hole, we need to get to Ernesto because that's the only picture left in existence of Hector. So they do this whole thing where they try to find him, or where they try to get to him, which then leads to Ernesto unwittingly showing everyone at this concert, that is like the final thing of the evening, showing everyone at the concert that he is just the biggest fucking dickhole. And which ends up making everybody just shuns him. And I don't know how, but somehow Miguel also ends up convincing everyone in the living world at the end of the movie that no, Ernesto was a dick. Actually, it was Hector who did everything. Hector is the one who should be remembered. Well, I guess not necessarily the whole world, but at least like this part of the world. And yeah, and it was just a real, and we then find out that actually, because the picture they had up on the Familia was a picture of Coco as a child with Miguel's great grandmother, but it was a picture that originally had her dad in it, or had her husband in it, but his face was ripped off because she didn't want to remember him. But because Miguel had knocked it off of the shelf earlier and destroyed the frame, he found out it had been folded, so you couldn't see he was holding a guitar, which was how he originally figured, oh, Ernesto must be my great grandfather because that's the same guitar he had. and shit like that. But we find out it was actually Hector all along, and Coco had that ripped off part. She had kept that in her journal. So they end up making a new frame, putting that up. The ending of the movie is that you see a year later where Coco has now died, and it's kind of sad, but you know. Oh, actually, the bit there were lots of parts where where I was close to shedding a tear in this movie, and the bit that finally broke me was in order to make Coco not forget Hector, Miguel plays the song "Remember Me" that he always played for her when she was a little kid before he left, and she starts singing along, and it was just the sweetest moment, and that was what not necessarily got her to just made her not senile anymore, but it made her shortly like remember things about her dad. And it was really, really sweet. And yeah, the ending of the movie is a year later, the next Day of the Dead, and they have their big celebration, and the dead family is there. You see Coco as a spirit, and everything is just really nice and cute. And finally, Hector, for the first time, is able to cross over because they now have his picture up on the Familia, and it feels like what Don Bluth said. It does. You can show anything to a kid in a movie as long as you have a happy ending, and this was just a really sweet ending. Like the entire family now embraces music, and it's all fine again, and it was just a really nice, feel good movie with a lot of like dark stuff happening, but I love that kind of dark stuff. And I'm also of the belief that kids mostly can deal with dark stuff as long as it's presented in the right way. And as Don Bluth said, if you give them a happy ending, it'll all be fine. But yeah, like definitely, even if you hadn't watched the movie and you saw the spoiler section, like go watch it just for the visuals, because oh my god, at times like it felt like it was like real places. The CGI was that good. It felt like some places, like the humans are and the spirits, like they are very stylized. Like they obviously don't look real, but the environments that looked like it was just it looked so photorealistic. It was incredible. But yeah, absolutely. I I'm not gonna do grading or anything because I don't really believe it. Like, I believe you should just, based on what I said, you should be able to figure out if you want to watch the movie or not. Though I do strongly recommend anyone watch this movie. It was great. So yeah, that is definitely a thumbs up for me. Guess I'm just gonna do that thumbs up. Like thumbs up maybe or thumbs down. I know that's basically ripping off why can't I remember that famous movie critic? I can't remember now. That's actually kind of embarrassing. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure you know who I'm talking about. But yeah, I'm just gonna do like thumbs up and stuff for my movie videos. Or I'm also gonna be talking about like TV shows or maybe even games that I have completed. Just talk about my thoughts after I've finished it. In this series, it's my thoughts. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this first installment of Pillow Talk. I hope I didn't ramble too much, and yeah, I absolutely recommend this movie. And I hopefully will see you closer to Christmas. Bye bye.